Hi everyone, and welcome to The Path to Reason. I'm your host Cindy Plaza, and tonight I have a special guest, Puck. Hi.
Hi. It's such an honor to be here. Like I watched that intro video and I see this like name after name of very intelligent, knowledgeable, popular people and me.
And you're a part of this community,
Oh,
so thanks for being here.
it's definitely an honor. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Like I was saying at the beginning, well, before the show started, I wanted to have you earlier, but when I started doing the show, you were working only behind the camera. And when you started going on the ACA shows, then that's when I started to be a little bit uh, rare in my videos because of the depression. So yeah, I'm super happy to have you here.
I can't believe it's been over a year already that I've been doing shows with the ACA. It's been a long, strange journey. And yeah, my first appearance on Truth Wanted was wow, October of 2020, and now here I am. I get to sit down and have a long conversation with you. So it's definitely taken me some great places.
Yeah, yeah, and but despite this, you don't have any content on your own, right?
I don't, and this is a failing on my part, and I get that. So one of the things that we talked about on Truth Wanted is some messages from our detractors, and it turns out that like I can think of plenty of people who might disagree with the ideas that I might have, but I don't have any very strong public detractors. Now, what this tells me is not that I am so good at making my points that nobody disagrees with me, but that maybe I haven't even been forward enough with my views for people to come out and say, "Oi, wait a second, I have a problem with that." So this is going to be a very big step for me because very rarely do I come on to any show to talk about a specific issue or a specific opinion. And now here I am. So thank you very much for giving me an avenue to do this. And I am reading the comments in real time, so I can respond immediately to my detractors. Bring it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, hi Kyle. Thanks for being here. So, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, of course. My online I go by Puck. Um, I have been an atheist for maybe 20 years, but really only been out and talking about it for about the past 6 or 7. I have lived. I was born and raised in Alaska to a Filipino family. I moved from there to Oregon and now finally to my home in Cincinnati, Ohio. And even now at 42, I probably play more video games than I did when I was in college. Even my the shirt that I'm wearing right now is a shirt from a video. Do you recognize this, Cindy?
No,
Okay,
doesn't ring a
this is a
bell.
character from Resident Evil 8.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't like Resident Evil games. I don't like horror games in general.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
love horror, so so it's only natural. I'll and represent that I like it. So
So before we start talking about our topic for today,
mm,
I'm going to ask you a question I ask all my guests, and so it's a little bit more difficult for you because you, as we said, you don't have your own content, and you don't have a specific angle of activism so far, except atheism, but it's quite broad, right? You
yeah.
don't have, and so I usually ask if we remove everything you're known for, like your ACA shows, who's left?
Who's left is like someone right now who I've just accepted that the things that I like to do for fun, like video games, puzzles, things that challenge my brain. I am going to always engage in stuff like that. If I had a kink, it would be learning, right? And I am very lucky that right now I have a job where I am doing for money what I would be doing for fun anyway. So you strip all the activism away, you strip all the beliefs away, and that's what you get. You get someone who's finally in a point in life where he says, "Let's just have fun."
Yeah, it's like being a child again.
It is. It is. We'll call this my midlife crisis, where you know what? Instead of buying a really expensive car, I'm just going to buy really good computer equipment and play all the kinds of video games that I never got to when I was younger.
Hi, Mercy. Good to see you here. Yeah, so I don't know if you can call that a midlife crisis. I think it's more like uh, centering yourself around what you really like.
Well, in a way, it is though, because okay, so I wasn't always doing as well as I am now. Like there were some times with much more financial struggle, and during those times, one of the things you got to be responsible. One of those things is you don't have as much time or money to be playing video games. So to me, it's not just video games; it's that I am now in a better part of life where I'm more stable. Not just financially but socially with situations around me, so that I can do something like, what, let's shut off the entire world for about 3 hours, and I can just sit down and play a game just for my sake. And there's a lot of things that factor into that, and some are in my control and some are out of my control, but I'm grateful that I have that opportunity.
Sure. So, as you said, you were born in Alaska, so you are an American. Do you have any knowledge of your roots in Philippines?
Yeah, very strongly. I was born in Alaska, but I spent several years being raised in the Philippines. And even after, let's say, I was about 5 years old when I permanently moved to the United States. But going back to the Philippines and keeping in communication with relatives was a regular thing. I can remember being back in the Philippines once every couple of years or so and spending a good amount of time there over the summers.
So you have a point of comparison between the US and somewhere else.
And at least one other country, but it's a
Yeah.
different one than most other people have. So,
Yes.
does that offer a unique perspective? Maybe. Has it changed the way I perceive things? Absolutely.
Well, from my experience, many Americans never left the U.S. Sometimes even their state or even their town. So I think that's a huge lack of curiosity and even knowledge. But you don't have this problem because, like we said, you have already this external view.
Yeah, I do. But then what I need to remember is that I have the view from one particular other culture. And even though I might have, I might have some eyes open toward this is what what's going on in the United States and compare it to the Philippines, I can't say that this is the same kind of shared experience that someone have who's knowledgeable about the United States and has roots in another country, in Europe, for example, or in Africa. I have my perspective, and because of that, I can see, like what you pointed out, that there are a lot of people who the United States and the culture in which they grew up is their reality, and other cultures are kind of like a vague curiosity. It's something that happens like over there, but doesn't necessarily impact them. So it's something that's easy to keep over there.
Yeah. What's the how is the U.S. viewed in Philippines?
Okay, so the last time I was able to really talk to somebody about this, because remember, I haven't really been to the Philippines in a long time, and though I keep communication with people, we don't often like. I can't remember the last time I asked that question of any of my cousins who are still in the Philippines. So, what do you guys think of America now? What do you think of 45? What are you guys thinking? I actually do know the answer to that one for a couple of people, but I don't know globally.
Yeah.
But the United States and the Philippines specifically have kind of a tense history, because there was a liberation after World War II, right? And then, depending on who you ask, it's either a really good thing that we helped instill a democratic style of government over there, or it was instilled into a society that wasn't quite ready for it. And because of that, the Philippines was uniquely put in a position where it attracted political candidates who were charismatic, but not necessarily the best for the people. And we would think about, I say something like that, we might think about the most recent one, Rodrigo Duterte, but this has a long history of going back. Corruption in Filipino politics is that's an old that's the subject that's older than me.
Yeah, Duterte is definitely someone in the same group as Trump, as Bolsonaro, and others.
Muhammadov is also on that list too. So yeah, and so these populist presidents get elected on what most people would consider completely horrific grounds. Somehow they're getting some support. And it's interesting because the elections in the Philippines happened before the elections in the United States. So, it was interesting seeing the parallels between why does this person get elected in the Philippines, and then how does this person get elected here in the United States? And this is like reason number one, if we're going to make a list of why people in the United States really should pay attention to the politics of other countries. There is some foreshadowing going on, and there is some learning that we can do from what's going on in other countries. And maybe we can avoid some of those mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, in France, we have presidential election in May 2022, and right now we have we have one extremely fascist candidate, and he's attracting a lot of views. So it scares me a lot, to
Yeah.
be honest.
And it's an interesting study how fascism, as much as we would like to paint it with a very negative brush, how it actually becomes appealing to some people. And I think for a large part, you kind of have to gloss over the word fascism and pick on the little aspects about it, right? I spend a little bit of time trying to dig into modern conservative ideology to try to figure out, it's like, what are these people actually thinking? What are their priorities? Why do they think that what they believe is right? I don't have enough conclusions on that yet. I've not done enough meaningful research, but I'm curious about that because it's not a small, isolated group of people who are saying, "Hey, let's vote this person in." They win with a
Yeah.
popular majority, so it's
Mhm.
not an insignificant number of people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and it's what puzzles me is that with everything we know from what happened in Germany, seeing that happening again today, that's at the same time frustrating and scary.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating thing to like. For me, I can take, and I acknowledge this is a point of privilege. So before anybody gets on me about this, yes, this is a privilege that I have, that I can look at it in an academic sense instead of a I am now actively fearing for and fighting for my life sense,
Yeah.
where I understand a lot of people are, where an election or a Supreme Court decision is not just, okay, well, I'll read the briefs the next morning, but eagerly anticipated because it could mean the difference between being able to access life-saving medical care, for example. So I understand it's the fight is a lot bigger and a lot more the stakes are a lot higher for more people than me. This puts me, yeah, like I said, in a position of privilege where I can just study it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a wildfire. When you stop it somewhere, it starts somewhere else.
Right.
And it's still big in the U.S., but it's starting here in France, the Netherlands also a little bit. So yeah, it's moving, and internet doesn't help with that, of course. But yeah, it's a major issue.
Okay, and here's like where I'm like we'll start to bring this to the main topic, right? It seems to me that the United States is large enough, and the communities far enough away that we feel like a lot of people in America feel like that what happens in other parts of the world are just so isolated from where they are that they can meaningfully shut it off. Now, phase one is just living in this bubble and realizing that it's there. Phase two then is actually liking the bubble and saying, no, you know what? We are far enough away from everybody else. All we want to do is to be left alone to practice our beliefs in peace. And the world is big enough that we don't care. We just want our own little place. And if you look up the way that the United States expanded westward in the 1800s and early 1900s, you can see a lot of this. Where if you didn't like how this state did things, there's plenty of space to go further west, and you can just go a couple of miles over that way and just start your own town, right? And this is another one of those reasons why it's a euphemism. So I almost don't want to say states' rights, right? But that's why the rights of smaller communities are seen as so much more of an important thing in the United States, rather than thinking of ourselves as Americans. We want to think of ourselves as being parts of smaller communities. This happens even here in Cincinnati, where I live in a very large city, right? There's several million people here. But they weren't always one big city. They used to be separated communities that were, separated by miles. And when all you had was horses, a couple of miles is, a good way to go. But as transportation and technology improves, of course, cities grow. And now, if you look at a map of Cincinnati from the top down, you probably couldn't tell where these little pockets and neighborhoods are. But the people know. The people absolutely can tell. I've seen t-shirts of people saying, I live in Oakley, not Hyde Park. Even though Oakley and Hyde Park are functionally identical to people like me who have only moved here in the past 10 years, I couldn't tell you where that border is, but they can. Because there was a very big ideological difference between why somebody would have lived in Oakley and lived in Hyde Park 200 years ago. Somehow those tendencies are growing even today. It's a fascinating place to live.
And do you think this is one of the reasons why the us versus them mentality in the US is so pregnant?
Possibly. And another part of it is, like, we're the new kid on the block. You compare us to most other countries, we're only 200 years old. How old is France, Cindy?
It's 800 years.
Right.
1300 years
Yeah, and
old.
how old is Germany? How old is Japan? How old are these other countries compared to the new kid on the block, United States? Which, I've often compared this. The United States is like a rebellious teenager who moved out of home and said to its parents in a document we now call the Declaration of Independence, I don't like the way I was raised, so I'm going to do things differently in my house.
Mm.
Right?
And then those worse.
Yeah, and we did. And we're having problems. We are having problems, but a part of those problems is because we can't admit, we can't look at this and go to our parents and say, hey, you know what? I guess you were right. Some of the problems we're having, we wouldn't be having if we had just listened to you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Britain. It was, we were young, we were stupid, we were immature.
Yeah. And part of this difficulty to acknowledge that is because of this exceptionalism we wanted to talk about
Yeah.
tonight. So can you describe what it is and how it's expressed in the US?
Okay. So, exceptionalism will take many forms. One of them is the isolationism that I was talking about, which is prevalent in history. And I remember that, in my early studies of 20th century history, the United States was happy to be left out of a lot of things, and would have been okay left out of things if it didn't, completely get to a boiling point like Pearl Harbor. And so there's the isolationism, but I think that what we want to talk about is not just the isolationism, which has some interesting side effects even today, but the exceptionalism, the idea that the United States is special, right? And the United States is somehow, and by thinking of yourself as special, it's almost impossible to separate that from thinking that you're better. Now, very few people in America are actually going to go out and explicitly say that. Right? They're not going to say, I think American. Of course, there's going to be, but then there's going to be people like me who say, better at what exactly? Better how? The number one answer you're going to get from Americans, and I'm sure you've heard this, is the old freedom, right?
Yeah.
But and I wish that I had someone who thought that, who's in chat today, because I can't think of a lot of American freedoms that aren't elsewhere, and I can think of some freedoms that happen elsewhere that we don't have here, right? And one of the first things that I think of about when I think about that is the right to decide to medically end my life. We don't have that here in the United States. That seems to be one of the biggest, most important rights that a person has, to decide whether or not they want to persist in living. We don't have that right. So when people say we have freedom, what freedom exactly are you talking about?
Yes. What do you have that the other country don't?
I personally can't think of anything. I mean, of course, I can think of some countries that are more repressive. For example, some countries do not have a truly free press. So I get that. I'm not trying to say that there aren't that everybody has the same kind of freedoms that we have, but I am saying that by and large, a lot of the countries around the world, like I could go over to France, and I can't think of anything that I can do in the United States that I can't find a way to do in France.
Carry a gun.
Even then, is it strictly illegal or is it just really difficult?
To carry it everywhere, that's forbidden. You can have one, but you have to ask the permission for it, and then you'll be tested. You need to have been part of a shooting group for at least, I think it's 6 months or 1 year. So you need to prove that you can use a gun before being able to get one.
So yeah, this probably wasn't supposed to be a Second Amendment show, but this is another one of those big ways where the idea is not just the gun. The gun is a metaphor. Okay, the gun is the litmus test for overreaching government, where if government in any way gets in the way of a citizen's right to defend themselves, and by defend themselves they say gun, but what they really want you to think is defend yourself, even though the weirdest thing, like every single armed forces around the world, no matter what kind of weaponry they have access to, will also teach you basic hand-to-hand combat, right? Because they acknowledge that self-defense also means what happens when you're this close to a person and you are unarmed, which happens. But people here who the term that gets used for it is ammosexuals. The ammosexuals who really like their guns, they don't emphasize the hand-to-hand part of defense. They emphasize the gun. And when they say gun, they don't mean a firearm. They mean a symbol which allows them to feel like they have a freedom that the government can't take away from them. So anything that steps on that, anything like registration, for example, or what do you call it, limitations on the type of weapon or the type of ammunition, anything like that is seen as government overreach, and therefore the government is trying to take over too much. That there's one exception. Like I can't think of any other country like that. So
Yeah, I've had this discussion several times, and yes, every time you try to ask why do you need a gun, the answer you get 90% of the time is to defend myself against a tyrannical government, and it's so stupid on so many levels, because what are you going to do against the biggest army on the planet? I mean,
right.
do you think your AR-55, 15 is going to do anything against a drone or a tank? Or it's
Yeah, and I often think about that. And my big question to them is, to anybody who is a big fan of guns, is to ask yourself, if I wanted to hurt someone or rob someone or kill someone, but I knew they had a gun, is it possible for me to come up with a way to do that to them, to make it so that even if they had a gun or not, doesn't even matter? And the answer is yes. It doesn't take that much of imagination. But then you have to turn that around and apply it the other way. That means even if you are armed, people can come up with ways to hurt you or kill you or rob you. The gun is nothing. The gun is psychology.
yeah.
I have personally, like, I've lived in a couple of bad neighborhoods and a couple of bad parts of town, and I have never myself, and again, I can't speak for anybody else, it's just my experience. I have never been in a situation where having a firearm would have necessarily led to a more positive outcome. I can't think of one.
Yeah, because it's so easy to try and solve a problem when you have a gun in your hand. Whereas if you don't, then you have to engage in discussion and try to de-escalate, and that nobody knows how to do that in the US. Even the police is not trying to do that.
Right. And like
Mostly.
our idea of de-escalating is to have a bigger weapon and make the other person back down. I mean, this is why the United States has the biggest military, not by a small margin either, right? I mean, we got
Yeah, it's the addition of the next six countries
yeah, we have like
in the
aircraft
list.
carriers
Yeah.
on aircraft carriers, not because we intend to use it, but because we intend for that to be a deterrent.
Hmm?
Does that make sense? You don't want to mess with us because of what we could do. Likewise, this trickles down to everyday interactions where it's like, you know what? You have a pistol. You don't want to mess with me because of what I could do to you. And for an individual, maybe we can make a justification for a citizen, but then it gets into how law enforcement is done in the country. And instead of doing genuine catering to the community and care and service to the community, now instead they are seen as people who are lording over the community with the threat of violence or even killing them, trying to keep them in line.
Yeah. Yeah, one side of the American exceptionalism that I hear very often, especially in movies and TV shows and any form of art, it's that the US is the light of the world. It's the guy that takes us to the right place because they are so good and they are with Jesus and this with all this religion side. But you have this idea that uh, everyone in the world looks up to the US to know what we have to do.
Okay, so now this is just my humility because like I said, when I came on the show, I see all these big names that show up in your channel trailer, and I'm like, who am I to sit down in the same chair as these people, right? And I would probably look at the United States in the same way, but that national pride does run deep. And you pointed out rightly that religion has a lot to do with this. Okay, now you go all the way back to the history of the United States where we felt we were exceptional already. We the colonies that existed for a couple of hundred years, we didn't like what we were doing, and we fired the shot that was heard around the world, right? Where not just us sparking a revolution, but it sparked a revolution apparently in many other places. Now, personally, I think it was just that the time was right for it, and someone was just waiting for the spark to start the flame. This is like what end Renaissance, right? So this was going to happen anyway. It's just we started it instead of France. And Cindy, after this, is going to school me on the French Revolution, I'm sure, because the only thing I know about it is what I've gotten from watching Les Miserables. I have a lot to learn. Okay, but even then, now you have the colonies. The entire westward expansion was driven by something called manifest destiny, where people just assumed that it was our God-given right and responsibility to expand across the continent and own all this land that was in between, never mind who we have to step on to get there.
And to educate the barbarians living there already.
Right. Now, I'm also going to so far as to say that we were not the first people to come up with this. And I'm going to trace this back to my Filipino heritage, because if you look at Southeast Asia, almost all the other countries there have some sort of polytheistic religious system, whether it's ancient tradition or Hinduism or something else. There is one exception, and that is the Philippines. And that's because the Philippines was colonized by Spain in the 15th century, right? So Spain does what Spain does, and it spreads its belief by killing everybody who disagrees. And that's why in the Philippines, you're going to find a lot of tribal Filipino families that can trace their histories back well into the tribal days, and they have traditional Filipino names. But you're also going to find a lot of Spanish names. You're going to find a lot of Hernandez there. You're going to find a lot of those traditionally Spanish names in the Philippines, and you're going to find the largest collection of adherents to Christianity than any other country in Southeast Asia. So no, this isn't a new United States thing. Okay, we're just one of the more recent examples of what happens when you decide that it's your God-given right to spread across the continent and just trample on whoever happens to already be there.
Yeah, everyone did it. Whether it's the Egyptians, the Romans, all throughout history, we have the exact same mentality.
Yeah. But what makes the United States interesting and special to me, I suppose, is the nature or the degree to which I can't say they've succeeded, because like these other empires have had, thousands of years to die down and settle down, and in some cases completely vanish. Whereas in the United States, we're arguably still in the prime. It's probably on its way down, but we're still in the success range where we can say whatever it was that we did yay long years ago, look at the success that it has brought us. I don't know what this is going to look like 1,000, 2,000 years from now. When people figure out, hey, the United States really didn't acquire this in the kindest of ways, and maybe someone will win out. Maybe the progressive will win out and realize, you know what, we had no right to take this land. Let's give it some of it back. Maybe that'll happen, or maybe we'll get too big for our britches, and as any organization that gets too big does, there will eventually be some sort of separation. Usually that happens with a good amount of violence, and I am I'm more deeply concerned about a United States civil war than a global war. just because, I mean, there's so many
Yeah,
things that are leading up to it right now, and it's
yeah, I
just a matter of
totally
time
agree.
before someone says, okay, we're yeah, see ya.
Yeah, because the division between the South and the North is still uh, quite strong.
Uh-huh. And it happens in the weirdest ways. Like you wouldn't think about it. Okay, so I used to drink a lot of soda, right? And where I'm from, we just call it soda. However, people in the United States call it very different things. Some people call it pop, for example. I don't think of it as pop. Pop is a kind of music people make fun of me for listening to. Now, there is another subset of people who call it Coke. It's not soda, it's not pop, it's Coke. And if you put this on a map where people are most likely to call a fizzy drink whatever, that Coke calling group is this very small group of states in the southeast, and I don't even want, like, if you can look this up in a number of different ways, and there always seems to be this little chunk down there in the southeast that is singled out somehow. And then you go back in history and you lay a map of which states aligned with the North and which states aligned with the South, and boy, if I don't want to say that correlation equals causation, but it's really hard to look at that and not say that culture had something to do with it.
Yeah.
There is a deep culture in the South. It's not enough that it's American; they are Southern American. I mean, if you follow music, there's not just rock, but there is Southern rock. Okay, they're not just Baptists, but there are Southern Baptists. They want to set themselves apart. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
well,
went off on a
it's
tangent.
no,
Sorry.
no, it's the Bible Belt. So
Mhm.
yeah, of course, it's going to be different.
Yeah, and it's so weird that it's so ingrained in there too. Like it's so ingrained to the point where, like, people, again, American exceptions, people just assume that this is the way it is and the way it's supposed to be, without getting that global awareness of, you know what, other people have taken the same problems and solved them in much better ways.
Do you think that if politicians hadn't used that on their advantage for political reasons, it would still exist today?
Okay, I didn't hear the what you were asking about. Can you try again? I'll listen a little bit better.
Do you think that if politicians hadn't used that separation uh, to their advantage, political advantage, do you think it would still exist?
Um, I don't know. I'm a terrible political analyst, and I think that anytime somebody suggests, like, if it was done a different way, what would it look like now? I think that's mostly guesswork. Like I
Yeah.
could,
Mhm.
so I mean, I could say something like, yeah, if there was no secession and no civil war, would it be this different? And the best answer I can come up with is, it's possible that someone else would have come up with a good reason that a number of states would believe something different enough to raise up arms over it. Am I missing the
The-
question?
No, no. The reason why I ask this question is because I was looking again at uh, the statues issues currently going on in the US. And you look at when they've been built, it's mostly 1910, 1920,
Mm-hmm.
or 1960s. And that's exactly when there's been a strong political force to enforce separation between black and white. And it's been political, but my question was, and my interrogation is, if this ideology hadn't been pushed and Ronald Reagan used it very much for his political gain, if those people hadn't used it and inflamed those ashes again every time they need it, I don't know if this separation would still exist.
No, I mean you're probably right. I mean, has it been used for political gain? Absolutely, because they know they're going to pad their numbers, right? I mean, there's a reason that why just about every one of those states down there, with the possible exception of Florida on occasion, leans red, right?
Yeah.
Because they know how to talk to those people, and to a certain extent, the blue people don't know how to talk to those people. And so, one of the most interesting things for me is how I still look at this. I'm so used to having to watch what I say and the exact words I use. I'm still using those words now, even if I don't have to. The red people are very good at talking to, or the red politicians are good at talking to the red people in the way that the red people need to be spoken to. The blue politicians have absolutely no idea how to do that. Now, at some point, they're going to need numbers, and that's what keeps the South going. Because along with that comes religious groups who, and this is their actual stated purpose, is to breed enough so that there's always going to be a voting majority. I wish I was joking about this. I don't have the names off the top of my head, but you're nodding, so you've heard about this
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
The
know.
idea is to have enough people by creating enough people so that you still always have a voting majority. And this maps very neatly to Genesis chapter 2, where the first commandment given to humans is go forth and multiply, be
Yeah.
fruitful and multiply and be stewards over this, something like that. So yeah, but yet another reason religion gets dragged into this is to why it's, I can't say it's the cause of the big mess, but I can say that it's very easy to use the tools of religion to push the tools of American exceptionalism.
But it's quite desperate when you think about it. I mean, having kids so they can vote to keep your way of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's a
when
lousy
you
reason to
think
have kids
about
in
it.
my
Yeah.
book, but you know what I mean? That's, your divine commandment. Who am I to say otherwise? I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it because like I've never liked the idea of pushing my ideology onto people who don't have access to the information to disagree with me, right? I say a lot of things
Yeah.
people are very free to disagree with, but then if you give it to people who are not in a position to disagree with you, for example your kids, who they just might not know any better, or they might unjustly value my opinion because they happen to be my kids, or they're students who are under my jurisdiction and for some crazy reason they've decided to look up to me. Look, I'm only 5'5". Nobody should be looking up to me. Okay. But you, like, I can, if I tell you something and you disagree with it, I don't think you'd have a problem saying, well, Puck, I disagree with you. Right. But to kids who don't have that same sense of social presence, who don't have that same sense of self, and that sense of I can stand up for what I believe, and it's really easy to quash them compared to shutting down an adult, right? So now it's about, raising them in an ideology where they have no opportunity, no meaningful opportunity to challenge it and question it. Like, my biggest beef with religion is not so much what they believe, but also how they treat the people who want to leave it, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are a number of organizations where if I decide, okay, guys, I'm just not a Columbus Blue Jackets fan anymore, right? It's fine. We're all still probably going to be friends again the next day. Religion, on the other hand, you can't just leave it. They make it very difficult on a number of levels, like to the point where, like, to leave the Mormon church requires a legal action. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
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 Oh,
Yeah.
we're all over the place. Rein me back in. What are we supposed to talk about here? I think
Exceptionalism. So,
yeah, no. See, that's the thing. It's so broad. Like, we picked a really, like, hugely broad topic, and
yeah.
each one of these we could talk about every individual one for another hour and a half. Do we want to talk about the South? We
Sure.
could. Do we want to talk about historical uses of religion and exceptionalism? We could. Do we want to talk about what we can do to stop it today? I hope.
I wanted to come back to this light of the world
Yeah.
thing, because I shared an article, a Wikipedia article in the chat, and basically it shows all foreign interventions by the US since they've been created,
Mm-hmm.
and since between 1945 and 2000, there's been 81 intervention uh, in other countries, and most of them were covert. And in about a third of them, the intervention, the result of it was a dictator. So it's again this contrast between reality and what Americans have been brainwashed to believe in. Like this country, the greatest country on earth. No, it's not.
Nope.
You can any metric you want. The U.S. is behind pretty much every developed countries, except
Sure. Not
military
medical
spending.
outcomes, quality of education for elementary and secondary age students.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Just about every metric I can think of, we're not even setting the pace for anything really meaningful. So yeah, I hear you. And so you're wondering about why these interventions?
No.
Okay.
I know it's
Yeah.
political. I just wanted to point out again this hypocrisy, you could say, but hypocrisy needs you need to know that you're lying to be a hypocrite, I would
Yeah.
say. Whereas in this case, I think the American people have been brainwashed for generations to believe this, at least since the end of World War II.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, it's very frustrating from the outside, and especially in Europe after after what happened with 45. But on the other hand, it's hard to be mad at the people because they don't know anything else.
Okay. And then I'll add one more layer to that. Not only do they not know anything else, but there is no apparent and immediate consequence to them for continuing to act the way they do. See, so it's like, one of the biggest deterrents to behavior is consequences, right?
Yeah.
But for, by and large, we don't get the consequences that we probably should have. And if we got those consequences, and if it was felt at the local level, at home level, at the this is what I like to do on weekends level, we're not going to have a choice but to say, hey, we made a bad mistake somewhere.
Yeah, like the US is not part of the international court system.
Nope.
Why is that? It's because they don't want to suffer the consequences of their covert operations, partially. Everything that gives consequences, the US is not part of them. They left the Paris Agreement. They left everything they can. They force this exceptionalism onto other people.
Yeah.
It's not just like we think we are better. It's we think we are better, and you have no words to say in this. We don't want to hear you say anything about this. What do
Right.
you think?
And I wonder what part of that also includes the fact that we're so far isolated from most of the other world that we feel like we should be able to get away with it. Like, and to an extent, it's true. Like, you had, in if you lived in Austria, you're completely surrounded by your neighbors, right? You can't do
Hmm?
anything without affecting them. They can't do anything without affecting you. But the United States is large enough that it can, by and large, insulate themselves from that. And not only that, but like, they can be somewhat sanitized from it also, like from war reporting is the first thing that comes to mind immediately, where someone who lives in a small town, their nearest neighbor might be miles away already. The nearest country is 1,000 miles away, so something like that that's happening just seems so like it might as well not even exist for how far away it is. So we get this sense that they don't affect us. Therefore, how could we possibly have any negative effect on them? We just want to live our life the way we want to live our life. It's other people who are messing up with it. And there's always a boogeyman, right? Like you pointed out, in the things happened after World War II. So one of the big boogeymen that there was an intentional campaign misleading against was the Soviet Union and
Yeah.
communism. And
Communism. Huh?
yeah, and like even to this day, people who are against communism and socialism probably have no idea what it actually is, other than they're not supposed to like it. Okay,
Yeah.
and because they because of shows that were popularized like the Twilight Zone or anything, people thought of communism as the antithesis of the American individual sense of self, right? The sense of I am the person who benefits most from my work because I stand alone as a person, forgetting completely that unless you're like a complete isolated person who you make your all your own food and all your own clothes and all your own tools, everything that you like, me personally, everything that I see around me is because other people were successful, right? I This shirt was because someone else was successful. They made a video game that was successful. They had a clothing company that was successful. They had a distribution
Mm,
system that was successful. It takes 100 successful people, 1,000, to get me one t-shirt. I don't stand alone, right?
yeah,
And so it is directly to my benefit to make sure that other people around me are successful. If you extend this to an international level, you take a look at something like saying the United States could not have developed to what it is had it not been for other countries doing their thing along the way, right? And the reason the United States can be so successful, if you want to use that particular word for it, it is not because of anything special about the United States, but because of a lot of factors that contributed to this.
mm,
Okay. Um, but there are a lot of people who don't see it that way, where they think that um, their success was because of that is largely a function of their effort and their sweat alone,
mm,
and forget that it takes an entire community to even get clean water to your house, right? And so
yeah.
the way I see it is, since I benefit greatly from the success of other people around me, I also think that a country is better for the success of its neighbors. Now, this is highly controversial to a lot of Americans. It's probably highly controversial to a lot of the audience here. But yeah, I really do think that we get better with cooperation and with common goals and shared interests than we do by misrepresenting other people and refusing to cooperate, by refusing to do something as simple as, let's just declare the metric system, shall we? Like, can we do it? Can we just get rid of daylight savings time, because it's not doing anybody any good? Um, so I don't know. I'm very critical, being very critical of the United States right now. I'm happy to have a platform to do so, but I also understand, hey, if I'm pushing it too far, if you need me to back off here on your channel, I get it.
I have this problem sometimes. I have a couple of friends. They're my neighbor, and sometimes I feel like I appear to be anti-American because I criticize things, and so I have to do exactly what you just did here, and refrain from keeping going on. But yeah, we're here to talk about this, and we're not anti-American. I'm definitely not. You're not. So yeah, we cannot solve any issue if we don't talk about them in
No,
the first
yeah,
place.
and let's get this right. Okay, when there is a very big difference between being anti-American and being critical of America. Does that make sense? Like
Yes,
it has to take, in some cases, someone who loves something very, very much to be critical of it. Because they have to be
exactly.
at the
Yeah.
very least familiar with
Mm.
it. Because if you were to criticize something like, what's a movie that's out now that you've probably seen that I haven't? I don't know. Do you watch the Marvel movies?
Yes, but
Okay.
not the last couple ones.
Okay, and that's fine. But going back to that, like if you take someone like you who's somewhat familiar with the Marvel movies and you criticize the latest one that came out, which I forget, is it Spider-Man? I don't
Yeah.
even remember. Okay, if for you to criticize that is one thing, because you've spent a lot of time immersed in it, studying it, you have a better idea. I haven't seen any Marvel movies since the very first X-Men movie. I don't think that one even counts, does it?
No.
Okay, so if I were to criticize it, I would only be criticizing my idea of what it is, right?
Mm.
If I were to truly be a meaningful critic of something, I'd better know something about it. And I don't. So, it's like the most I can say is, well, it just doesn't seem like it's my kind of movie, but I couldn't tell you for any good reason that I don't like it.
It depends on the purpose of the criticism,
Hmm.
because if your point is only to say this is bad, inherently bad, then yeah, you can criticize everything you want, and you won't get anything from it, and then yes, you can be called anti something.
Hmm.
Like criticizing the actions of the state of Israel, that doesn't make you anti-Semite because you're criticizing the action of a government, not
Right.
the people.
And I think
So,
that's,
and that's
yeah,
the same
sorry, go
thing
ahead, go
here.
ahead.
No, no,
Go ahead. I
no.
didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt you. Please continue if you
no,
have.
it's the same thing here.
Yeah, where I think it is very possible to be critical of specific elements within a movement, but still be supportive of the movement as a whole. Does that make sense? And in fact, it's good
Yes.
to be critical, especially of the things that you believe strongly in, because you want to affect meaningful change. You want it to be better. So I'm not anti-American in the sense that I want America to fail, but I am critical of America because I don't want to see anything fail. But I want to see it succeed in cooperation with the necessary factors that exist around us. Right?
Yeah.
We're not going to succeed in a bubble. I think we're going to be best off with international cooperation.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had an idea about what you said in the first place.
Hmm.
Do you remember what you said? Uh,
About what specifically? I said a lot of crazy
just the,
things.
the, the, the last the last couple ideas you had.
Oh, about like I'm not anti-American. I want America to succeed. I want organizations to succeed, but that's okay to be critical about them. Where was I?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You said it was okay to criticize a movement you're part of and you believe in, and I don't think there is any other way, because if you don't criticize any movement you're in, then you're getting into an echo chamber, and the movement never changes. And if it's wrong in some way, you will never find out. So you have to bring criticism at some point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, mistakes don't get corrected.
Hmm. And like as a member of a lot of different organizations and different kinds of organizations, I would rather have it be like quietly taken care of from the inside rather than make a mistake that's so big it draws way too much opposition from outside. Does that make sense? It's like,
Yeah,
if there's a problem, I want to hear about it. If I'm the manager of a, if I'm the owner of a business and there are problems going on, I would want to know about it. Right. And I would want to have a meaningful opportunity to address those rather
mhm,
than have it come from outside. So yeah, by being critical of America, I don't think that means that I am anti-American. I hope it doesn't come across that way, because I want America to be successful, but to me that might mean something very different from another person who lives just down the street. So it's an interesting battle to fight, even on my own little town of Deer Park, Ohio. So this is fun. Here's some weird American stuff for you, Cindy. And we'll go on a lighter note here to wrap up. Deer Park, the city that I live in, is less than 1 square mile in total area. Okay, and it is surrounded on all sides. Some of it is the city of Cincinnati. Some of it is a city called Silverton. Some of it is a city called Blue Ash. All these are little individual cities. Now, the weird thing is, all these individual cities have their own school district. They have their own tax structure. They have their own municipal code. They have their own fire departments and police departments. Every single chunk, because it is so important for us to say we are Deer Park, rather than to say, you know what, we share some of the problems that Amberley Village has. We share some of the same problems that Sycamore Township has. So if we cooperated, we could probably have a better chance of handling these issues that affect all of us, instead of trying to make yourself so distinct as an individual to the point where you are making decisions that affect your neighbors in ways that you don't realize. So one way is Amberley Village has decided in their town charter that there will be no public transportation stops within Amberley Village. Now, what this means is the Cincinnati Metro transportation system cannot service that neighborhood. Now, is that something that the citizens of that neighborhood want? Maybe. Is it something that gets in the way of municipal planning? Absolutely. So now we decide what's more important. Saying to Amberley Village, yes, absolutely. You know what? You have your town charter from the 1700s, and you are absolutely allowed to continue to operate your particular chunk of Ohio the way you see fit. Or is it more important to say, you know what? There are 2 million Cincinnati citizens other than the people who live in the confines of Amberley Village. And it is more important for us to cater to the needs of these 2 million people than to preserve this archaic rule that we don't even follow for the same reason that we had to follow it when it first started.
It's also a sign of entitlement, because obviously everything is multiplied by the number of towns you have. So
Right.
that costs an amazing amount of money. Whereas if you,
Yes.
uh, Belgium did that in 72 or 73. They regrouped the all small cities around one big city. It became one big city. So they mixed everything from city halls to every system, water, electricity, internet. Everything has been grouped to serve everyone, and that's much more. It's much cheaper
Yeah.
and it's much more convenient and
I would argue more effective, and I could probably
more
find
effective.
studies to
Yes,
say
yeah.
that a unified garbage collection system is probably better than here. Here's how bad it is here, Cindy. Okay, the border between city of Deer Park and Sycamore Township is on my street. It's down that way about only about 500 feet, and Deer Park has to pay for its own snow removal from its streets. That's fine, but it gets ridiculous. It gets to the point where the machines that plow the roads will drive up to the city line, which is in the middle of I mean, you're going down between houses. That's where the line is. They will stop there, turn around, and only plow the Deer Park end of the street. And Sycamore Township does the same thing. They will plow the Sycamore part, turn around on the street, and then go back that way. That dividing
Yes.
line is between houses on the same street. One side of that line goes to Deer Park High School, the other part goes to Sycamore High School. It's such an arbitrary place to put that line, and it's so enforced. So if it's enforced by legislation, pretty soon it's not very long until it gets enforced by culture also. Where this is Sycamore's influence and this is Deer Park's influence, and that's how it continues to persist. This idea of we can hold a separate identity and not think of their problems as problems that affect us. It's a terrible cycle.
Yeah, it still amazes me that even with this level of tribalism,
Mm.
you have so many people being patriot at the American level. I mean, how do they concede both?
I
It's
my
puzzling.
best guess is there's two parts to this, and one part is just not being educated and not knowing enough. You take the information that you've been given, and that's what you go by. And some people don't have the time or opportunity to seek information that might be contrary, and some people actively don't want to. Right? They're like, okay, we're the best. I don't want to hear information process that would make me question this. And then on top of that, there's a very deliberate campaign of misinformation that continues spewing out stuff like America is the absolute best. So
Mm.
these people who don't have the time or means or ability to do their own research hear a figure that they consider to be an authority saying something like America is the best. They don't have the means to question it, so why would they? And then they hear someone else being critical of it, and these people will look at that critical person and say, what leg do you have to stand on? I have this person up in government saying it's the best. I have lots of people in government saying it's the best. I have all my neighbors saying it's the best. Okay? Who are you? Who are you to be critical of this? And you can easily dismiss a person like that. You can easily dismiss people like that because there are a few of them and because you're far enough away from them.
But if you look at the problem from the other side, um, it wouldn't surprise me that some politicians feel like they're trapped into this discourse that America is the greatest country on the planet, because they know obviously that it's not the case. But if they don't say it, then they won't get any votes.
Right.
because they will be seen as anti-American, as we said. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if some feel trapped in this discourse.
Yeah, just like, you know what, one of the guesses that a lot of people in our community like to talk about is there are probably a lot more politicians who are agnostic or atheist than publicly admit are agnostic or atheist, and there are probably, like, the higher up you go, it's very possible that some of them are only performatively religious
Mm,
because they know that it would cost them popularity and votes if they
yeah.
were not. That's I don't know how that works in other countries. How are things there? Are you guys likely to vote an atheist into office?
We don't even know if I wouldn't be able to tell you if Macron is an atheist or not, and same goes for all the previous presidents. It's not even a topic here.
You know what? I'd be fine with that, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if I didn't know, and if it was to the point where, based on their political actions, I could not tell, I'd be fine with that. I don't need to know the political or the religious leanings of those in power. But here, it's almost a prerequisite. It's almost like you have to be, right? To the point where, like, even in the House of Representatives, I think Hammond Meta counted a total of three 3 out of 400. And again, this happens in higher levels, so it bleeds down to the lower levels. In the
Mhm.
city of Reading, for example, which is 2 towns over from me, I looked at their city council. Every single one of them either had a degree in theology or once worked in ministry. Okay, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, but when everybody in your city council is a theologian or a former minister or at least worked in clergy, that's not a very diverse group of representation.
Yeah, in France, you're not supposed to express your religion if you are in a position of power. If you were elected, then since 1905, where we voted a very strong separation between state and religion law, since then we kept the separation very, very strongly, and that's a very good thing, because there are some times where we have issues like some city wants to put Christmas decoration and Jesus and Mary and Joseph, a scene like this, and they can't because it's religious, but some say it's just cultural. So, but that's very, very small in comparison to what happens in the US.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, some well, a very few number of politicians are openly religious, and they don't tend to be very, very popular. So yeah, it's not even an issue. It's
Yeah.
it's not that it's not an issue. It's not even a thing.
Yeah. And this, we I would love to say the United States is not a Christian nation, and officially it's not. Like, we don't have a state
Yeah,
religion. Like, UK has a state religion, Ireland has a state religion, Norway has a state religion, right? But somehow they are able to stay more secular in their governments than we are, where even though we have nothing official, yeah, just try running for Senate on a secular platform. It's not going to get you very far. At some point, somebody is going to ask about your history with church, because going to church and being a Christian is synonymous with being good.
yeah,
And this is one of the biggest things that I try to fight against in my activism. This is why, like, conversations, does God exist, does God not exist, that's why those are fine, and I get it, those are important for people to have. I want to have the next conversation where, even if you have a God and even if you think that this is good, at some point you're still going to have to convince other people of it. Okay, you're going to have to. This is why I don't really care for objective morality, because that's the problem with being right, Cindy. Most of the time it doesn't matter. right? So
Yeah.
now
Mm.
we turn this back on us, where you and I think we're right, and you and I think that the things that we're critical of regarding the United States, regarding exceptionalism, regarding isolationism, we can think that there's objective harms to it. We can think that we're wrong, or we can think that we're right and everybody else is wrong, right? Does that matter if we can't sell it? Does that matter if we can't convince other people, especially the people who hold the power but don't realize that they do? At some point, we're going to need to find some way to break through to them.
Yeah.
And if you know
Yeah.
how to do that, you're a better person than me, because I've been struggling for a while.
No, I'm in the same position. I recently I've been thinking about something very very specific. Uh, when we say that we want to teach critical thinking because it helps people make better decisions, because normally better decisions or decisions based on reality are better, but I don't think we can sell this as much as we think we can, because even if you have the right information and you make the right decision, something bad can happen from it.
Yes.
So making the right decision uh, doesn't always make the result good. So if knowing the truth and acting accordingly doesn't necessarily bring you good things, then why would you care about the truth?
No, I hear you. And then the other thing
And
is, like, we may be operating on two completely different base set of assumptions, right? Like, there's some people who believe that everybody is being equal in a society should have equal opportunities, where there's some other people who say, yeah, I mean, that's right on paper, but we also know that everybody is inherently different, and you can't be different and equal at the same time. So even if you gave equal opportunities to everybody, they're not going to utilize it in the same way. And if they're not going to utilize it in the same way, and some of it might be squandered or misused, then why are we helping those people who are just going to squander or misuse it in the first place? I mean, so this is my problem with critical thinking, because critical thinking by itself can lead you to very different conclusions. So when people are advocates of critical thinking, I have to wonder, is it because you think that people who disagree just haven't thought about it in the right way? My thinking is they have thought about it, but they're just starting from a different place, which of course means they're going to end up in a different place. But they can probably get there using reason. Like, I've been studying. Oh God, please stop me. I've been studying conservatism for about the past year now, because I don't understand what's going on over there. And the best way for me to understand it is to look back at the historical roots of it and try to figure out, how did conservatism even begin to pick up as a movement, uh, to continue on to be as popular as is today. Um, I'm, like I said, very early on. I'm still in the early stages of investigation and nowhere near ready to talk about this. But it seems to me that they start off with a completely different set of assumptions than progressives do. So because they, even if they critically applied information and assessed data, if they have the same set of data but different starting points, different presuppositions, they're going to end up in very different places. Are people inherently equal, or are all people inherently different and therefore could never be equal? That's a really tough question.
yeah, I hear what you say, but I'm not sure I entirely agree.
Good. We get to the disagreement parts. Good, good, good.
Yeah. I think the cases where taking the same information and applying critical thinking the right way will lead you to different conclusions. I think those cases are extremely rare. I think in 95% of the cases, if you take the same set of facts and you apply critical thinking, then you'll get the same conclusions. Because critical thinking, if you do it correctly, it removes all biases
Okay.
if it's done properly. So there shouldn't be any presupposition, there shouldn't be any problem with interpretation, because the data, and the thinking should be the same. So the way I see critical thinking, it's I don't think it's that not vague, but uncertain, as you would say. What do you think?
I think this is going to be an interesting conversation for us to continue to have over the next few months, because like on issues from, from conservative to progressive politics to is there a god, very intelligent people end up on either side of this, and very intelligent people can use rationality and critical thinking and data to support their claims. I don't think we're going to resolve it tonight, just like I don't think we're going to resolve anything tonight. I'm glad we disagree on this because this is going to be an interesting springboard into future conversations.
Yeah.
But I actually do think that if you have a different set of priorities, if you have a different set of goals, like if your goal isn't necessarily inclusion, but say meritocracy, right? Maybe they're going to step on each other's toes far enough down the line, right? Where we say something like, is it important that directors of movies who are minorities should have representation in things like the Oscars and the Academy Awards, the big award shows? Is it important to show diversity and inclusion in that, or is it important that it maintains a pure meritocracy, even if that means women and minorities get put aside, as long as the best of the best end up on the show? Now, the big problem with this is the Oscars are by no means the determinant of who the best movies are, right? We know that there's a lot of bias that goes into there, but if you look at that in other contexts, now it starts to raise a question where, do we want the best of the best to be in here, or do we want inclusion? Even if it's not the best, we want to show diversity. We talked about this in an episode of Nonprofits early last year, where we were examining the cabinet that the new president had put in. And it was probably the most demographically diverse cabinet that had ever been put in, right? And one of the questions we weighed was, what is more important, to show diversity and to show inclusion, or to show a pure meritocracy? I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that. I know that I can defend my answer, but I also don't know if it is the best answer.
You gave the answer to that question earlier. You said depends on the goals, because being rational, it has several meanings. It's whether the way you think, but it's also someone who is rational could be defined as someone who applies the best method to reach the goal they set themselves. So if we don't have the same goals, of course, we can have different rational processes. In that context, yes, I totally agree. If we have two groups of people and they have each their own goal, then they can be rational in doing opposite things. In this way, I totally agree. But if we have the same goal, then we should have we should be able to base our decisions on data, and these don't. I don't think you can obtain different meanings and different conclusions from the same data if you apply critical thinking correctly.
This would be fascinating for both of us to do a little bit more research on and continue the conversation, even if it's not in public, right? Like I just like talking to you. Okay. And one of the reasons I like talking to you is because even if we disagree, which we do, let's not color it up for the audience. When we disagree, we're able to talk about it in a respectful way, where we still end up shaking hands afterwards. Now, maybe I just haven't talked to you enough to really disagree with you on the super important stuff. Like maybe we just haven't gotten there, but I'm glad to be able to be part of a model of showing where people can disagree and still be able to cooperate with each other later. Because, there are a lot of things that you and I both agree with and both believe in and both want to be activists for. And we can work together on those, even though we might have some really deep disagreements elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's
I
actually, I kind of want to suss out those disagreements because you seem like a fascinating, well read, well researched person that I would love to compare my notes against. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, and it's a great time for me to start being right.
I don't necessarily agree with your assessment there, but thanks.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I have this thing with compliments and especially intelligence compliments. I don't like them. I won't explain why because it's a long explanation. But yeah, we can talk about it off air.
hmm.
But yeah, I don't think you should be honored to be on my show because I don't think I'm so much valuable to be on. I mean, I don't even have 200 subs. I'm not a big channel. I don't think I give extremely smart content or insights. So yeah, yeah, you can be happy, you can be whatever, but being honored, I don't think I'm worth it.
Okay, well, to which I will say this, take it or leave it. Um, but no matter how big you are, or no matter how small you are, there's going to be some people that you can touch and that will relate to you and will listen to you that won't listen to me. And vice versa, certainly, right? There's
Yeah,
some people that I would be able to reach that you wouldn't. So it doesn't matter how big you are. There are going to be people that you are speaking to in a better way than anybody else can. Even though you say you
yeah.
only have 200 subscribers, I'm willing to bet within that 200, some of them have decided that you are their favorite and you are the one that they want to listen to and learn from and look up to and aspire to be to be like. So no, it doesn't matter how many subscribers you have. It matters that you have this platform and you've decided that I am worthy of having the seat next to you. So for that, I'm grateful.
Okay, well, thanks. And yeah,
Kyle,
you
you are.
can.
Let me just address this right now. Kyle, you absolutely are. Okay, because like I said, there are going to be some people that you can that can relate to you and that will listen to you in a way that they're never going to do that for me. Okay, so you absolutely do. I bet you can anti-Kalam with the best of them, and I bet that you can make a case for progressivism over conservatism just as good as anybody else can. Okay, you've been around the community. You've heard it. In fact, you know what? Let's do it. I want to hear from you, Kyle. I want to hear more about your beliefs and hear the way you sorry, the way you approach your activism.
Um,
Kyle would be a great guest, by the way, Cindy. Just so you know,
yes.
he shows up in a lot of after parties. He's got a wonderful setup. He's fantastic. Great guy.
Yes, yeah, I think you're right. Kyle send me a message and we'll set something up.
Not that I'm okay. You know what? Okay, that was I shouldn't have reached and like invited people onto your show for
No,
you.
no, you're right because I have this problem of being able to communicate well with people. I have this restraint, and it's very hard for me to go to people. So and that's probably one of the reasons why my channel doesn't grow as much as it could. It's because of this. Because like Ethan, for example, Ethan. He grew so fast because he has this ability to go to people and talk to them, and I don't have this.
It's because he has absolutely no shame, and that's good. That's okay.
Yeah,
But a lot of us are, we have that hesitation. We're like, why would anybody want to listen to us? Well, the thing is, people already are. And no matter how small in a community you think that you are, I'm willing to bet there's one person, at least one person in there whose favorite person to talk to is you. And Cindy, you've been around the block a few times, so I am absolutely willing to bet you are at least some people's favorite person in the community to talk to. So it's fantastic that you have a place like this. It's fantastic that you do collabs with so many people. It's great that you poke your head into nonprofits every now and then and decide that they're worth your time to work with. So and there's so many other places where I'm totally happy to see your voice in more and more more and more places. Don't ever think of yourself unworthy, even if you like. Okay, it's true. You might not be the most knowledgeable on a particular subject. I think you'll admit that, right? But that doesn't matter. Again, there are some people that you're going to be able to reach with the knowledge that you do have and the
Mm.
way that you present it and the person that you are in ways that I can't. So keep doing it,
I
and Kyle, start doing it.
Yeah, there are two things I would like to do more. It's debates. I would love to do more debates, and calling shows.
Nice.
I'm thinking about starting one in French.
Ooh.
Um,
Okay, in which case I'm completely out because I haven't taken French since high school.
but yeah, that's something I think I would be good at.
Yeah.
Yeah, because yeah, I'm good at understanding reasonings and deconstructing them. So yeah.
So I would actually like this might be an interesting thing to talk about because I actually don't like the performative nature of debates. I like a good healthy conversation about a topic, but I think that putting it on on a stage by putting it on a spotlight makes it more about the performative nature of the debate rather than the clash of ideas, where the winner is not necessarily the person who has the best idea that has the best defense that they can convince the other person of, but who looks best in front of an audience.
Yes, I totally agree with this.
Okay.
I had uh, two or three debates so far, and they went very well. But I agree with you in the sense that sometimes, and I've seen it with one specific person, uh, they will be shown to be completely wrong, and then at the end, claim victory.
Yeah.
And yeah, and and that's at the same time hilarious and also pathetic,
So there's this
kind of.
one of my favorite quotes from Ronald Reagan. He said, "If you're explaining, you're losing." Have you heard that? So if someone says something short and quick and wrong, that's more easy to remember than someone who needs to take the next 20 minutes explaining why it's wrong. And
Exactly, yeah.
months afterwards, after everybody's forgotten exactly what was said, they'll remember the attitude and the posture of the people who were in that debate. So even if
Yeah,
someone is completely wrong and quote unquote losing, or at least we think they're losing, if they don't act like they're losing, at least a small percentage, a significant portion of people are going to look at that and say, wow, this person looks like they're winning, which means
yeah.
they probably are.
Yeah, I see debates as a good way to educate people on the basics of critical thinking.
Mhm.
That's how I see them.
It is,
Because
but if you frame them, if you find the people who look for debates for that, who look to say, yeah, you know what, I realize that they didn't have a rebuttal to 90% of your argument. So, you clearly won the debate,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
you want to reach those people. The problem is this is the internet. This is YouTube, and people love a dumpster fire. Okay. And I'm willing to bet that the number of people who are there to watch the dumpster fire and to watch two people just firing shots at each other outnumber the people who are there who are genuinely on the fence and want to hear the best case for both sides.
yeah. I totally agree. But that's not why we do the debates. It's not for those people. It's for the ones who want to learn. And even if there's only one who understands better, like a syllogism, how it
Mhm.
works,
Yeah.
that's totally worth it. Even if it's just one person.
Yet another thing that we could probably go several rounds about. Let's have a debate about whether or not we should have debates. No, I'm serious. Let's do this. Look, you're never going to find a more impartial audience than the one you have now because I can't think of a single person in chat who actually likes me. So, if we start talking about this, is debate beneficial for social movements? That can be the thesis. You say yes, I say no. Okay? And then we actually come to the table and have a debate about it. Let's do
Yeah.
this. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe debate really is a good way to affect social change. Maybe it's not, but let's talk about it, and let's do it in the format that's being put on trial, the debate itself. How
Yeah,
fun would that
we can
be?
do that.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, even if it's just for fun. Yeah,
Yes.
could be interesting.
Yeah, debates for fun help you sharpen your skills for the debates that aren't
Yeah.
just for fun.
Hey, Blazing Wizard Pop. Nice of you to show up at the end.
Oh, hey, Pope. Long time.
Yeah, he's always around in every show.
Yeah. Yeah, but we gotta wrap this up. Is Puck is genuinely interested in what's right? Yeah, I do. You know what? I'm wrong about a lot of things. It's how I eventually become right. Okay, so I don't mind if somebody looks at something I say and say, hey, here's the errors with it, or here's the problems with it. Okay, let's talk about it. I've changed my position on a lot of things over time, and I don't believe that everything I believe today is exactly the same thing I'm going to believe 10 years from now. But it's got to take the right kind of thing to turn me around, which is like my biggest problem with theists and conservatives. It's not that they don't get their ideas. It's not that they don't understand what they're talking about. It's that they can't sell it. They don't know how to talk to other people who don't necessarily like. How many times have you talked to a theist or someone and they talk to you the same way their preacher talks to them, or to how an authority talks to them?
Yeah.
It's like that doesn't work on us. Okay, you can't talk down to us in that way, because we as a group don't like to be talked down to. And there's a certain kind of thing that we like. We don't care what's in the Bible, so don't bring the Bible. All right, because if it's true, it doesn't have to be in the Bible anyway. Don't let me don't let me keep going on and on about that.
Yeah, just bye, Kyle.
Good
We're
night,
going
Kyle.
to
Thank
finish
you.
anyway. And
Book
yeah,
Kyle for this show. He deserves this seat as
yeah,
much as I do.
yeah. Well, yeah, we just need to find a topic to discuss. But yeah, it's not early here. It's 1:30. It's late. It's not
Oh,
early.
get
It's
some
late.
get some sleep. My goodness, I feel bad for keeping you up so late. Just look at that. There's that American centrism again, where we think that everybody should be on our time zones, and it makes it very inconvenient for people in Europe. So.
Well, it's we have the exact distance that makes it very uncomfortable if I want to have Americans on my show and if Americans want me in their show. It's just the right amount of distance that.
Oh.
But yeah, it's 1:30, and so we're going to wrap it up. So, any final thought about American exceptionalism?
Yeah, anything that we covered today here or talked about here is but the tip of the iceberg, and there are many, many rabbit holes that we could go. We could have had an entire show like you and I talked about the separation of the South, and we could have done an entire show about manifest destiny. We could have done an entire show about colonialism. This is the very start of the conversation. Now, I'm willing to continue to have it. Just find me wherever I go by the handle What the Puck and the number 0 on Twitter, because the number 0 looks like a hockey puck. Find me on Twitter, find me anywhere, and keep the conversation going with me. At the very worst, leave a comment here. I'm sure Cindy would be happy to send all the hate mail that goes to me and forward it directly to Deer Park, Ohio, to make sure that I get it. I don't want this to be the end of the conversation. And again, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Please come to me and correct me. So let's hope that this is not the end, and do not let this conversation be the last one that you listen to about exceptionalism.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here again. It's not an honor; it's a pleasure to have you here, and that you accepted to be here. So I don't have a Patreon, so if you want to help the channel, down below there's a link to my Patreon where you can buy books. That's pretty much all there is on my Amazon wishlist. You have also my what's the name? Link tree to my all my links and everything you want to find, everywhere you want to find me. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, ring the bell, everything like this. And thank you all for being here tonight. It's been a very great discussion we had.
This was
Thanks,
fun.
Pac, for that. Yeah, it was fun. Thank you very much. And see you everyone next time.